The moment I turned into my driveway during the middle of a brutal blizzard, I knew something was off. Snowdrifts were piled nearly a foot high. The wind was screaming through the neighborhood, and after spending hours responding to a 12-car pileup on Highway 9, all I wanted was warmth and electricity. Instead, I found an empty space where my backup generator should have been. The spot beside the fence, where the machine normally hummed through every storm, was vacant. All that remained were drag marks cutting through the snow and leading toward the street. My security system was offline. The house was freezing cold, and my brand-new neighbor had stolen the one thing standing between me and a long list of convicted criminals who would love to find me vulnerable. 20 minutes later, I found her standing in her doorway with her arms folded across her chest, wearing a smug smile that instantly made my blood boil. "Keep your ugly, noisy junk out of our upscale neighborhood. You welfare freeloader!" she snapped. The taste of anger hit the back of my throat like metal. She looked at me and saw nothing more than another working-class nobody she could bully. What she didn't realize was that she had just picked a fight with someone capable of turning her world upside down with a single phone call. Before I tell you what happened next, let me explain how I got into this situation. My name is Earl Bachman. I'm 52 years old, and 8 months ago, the voters of Millfield County elected me sheriff. Not a bad accomplishment for a guy who started his career walking a beat nearly 3 decades ago. The funny thing was that nobody in my new neighborhood knew who I was. A few months earlier, I'd gone through a painful divorce that left me emotionally drained and financially battered. My ex-wife kept a large family home. I ended up with attorney bills and a schedule that forced my teenage daughter, Emma, to divide her time between 2 households every other weekend. I needed a clean slate, somewhere quiet, somewhere nobody knew my history. That's how I ended up buying a modest 3-bedroom ranch house in Pinewood Estates. The place was exactly what I needed. The street was peaceful. The structure was solid, and best of all, it included a detached garage where I could spend weekends working on my old pickup truck. The truck itself was a 1998 Ford F-150 with more rust than paint. I could have easily afforded something newer, but I preferred staying under the radar. Every time I started my backup generator, the smell of diesel mixed with cold winter air reminded me of my days at the police academy. Those memories always brought a sense of comfort. More importantly, that generator served a purpose far beyond keeping the lights on. It powered my home security system. After 30 years of putting dangerous people behind bars, I'd made more than a few enemies. Some criminals never forget a face. Over the years, I'd received countless threats, especially after helping dismantle a major drug trafficking organization during my last assignment. The generator ensured my surveillance cameras, alarms, and motion sensors continued operating even when the power grid failed. I first met Felicia Worthington about 3 weeks after moving into Pinewood Estates. I was unloading groceries from my battered truck when she marched across the street in a pair of impossibly high heels. She wore enough makeup to stock an entire department store counter and carried a smile that never quite reached her eyes. Her gaze lingered on my truck as if it were leaking toxic waste onto the pavement. "Welcome to the neighborhood," she said, though her tone suggested the exact opposite. "I'm Felicia Worthington, president of the Homeowners Association. We'll need to discuss a few community standards." I could smell her expensive perfume from several feet away. It was the kind of fragrance designed to impress people but ended up feeling overwhelming. "Nice to meet you," I replied. "I'm Earl Bachman." She looked from my truck to my work clothes and back again. I could practically see her assumptions forming in real time. Unemployed, maybe disabled. Definitely not the kind of resident she wanted representing Pinewood Estates. "Well, Earl," she said, pronouncing my name as if it left a bad taste in her mouth, "I hope you'll take the time to familiarize yourself with our HOA guidelines. We take great pride in maintaining property values here." Felicia drove a spotless BMW with a vanity plate that read Blessed One. Personally, I thought she'd been blessed with the personality of a parking ticket. The real trouble started the night of the blizzard. The truck itself was a 1998 Ford F-150 with more rust than paint. I could have easily afforded something newer, but I preferred staying under the radar. Every time I started my backup generator, the smell of diesel mixed with cold winter air reminded me of my days at the police academy. Those memories always brought a sense of comfort. More importantly, that generator served a purpose far beyond keeping the lights on. It powered my home security system. After 30 years of putting dangerous people behind bars, I'd made more than a few enemies. Some criminals never forget a face. Over the years, I'd received countless threats, especially after helping dismantle a major drug trafficking organization during my last assignment. The generator ensured my surveillance cameras, alarms, and motion sensors continued operating even when the power grid failed. I first met Felicia Worthington about 3 weeks after moving into Pinewood Estates. I was unloading groceries from my battered truck when she marched across the street in a pair of impossibly high heels. She wore enough makeup to stock an entire department store counter and carried a smile that never quite reached her eyes. Her gaze lingered on my truck as if it were leaking toxic waste onto the pavement. "Welcome to the neighborhood," she said, though her tone suggested the exact opposite. "I'm Felicia Worthington, president of the Homeowners Association. We'll need to discuss a few community standards." I could smell her expensive perfume from several feet away. It was the kind of fragrance designed to impress people but ended up feeling overwhelming. "Nice to meet you," I replied. "I'm Earl Bachman." She looked from my truck to my work clothes and back again. I could practically see her assumptions forming in real time. Unemployed, maybe disabled. Definitely not the kind of resident she wanted representing Pinewood Estates. "Well, Earl," she said, pronouncing my name as if it left a bad taste in her mouth, "I hope you'll take the time to familiarize yourself with our HOA guidelines. We take great pride in maintaining property values here." Felicia drove a spotless BMW with a vanity plate that read "Blessed One." Personally, I thought she'd been blessed with the personality of a parking ticket. The real trouble started the night of the blizzard, after discovering my generator missing and exchanging harsh words. With Felicia on her front porch, I convinced myself we could still resolve things like reasonable adults. I couldn't have been more wrong. The next morning, right on schedule, Felicia marched up my driveway as if she owned the entire neighborhood. This time she wasn't alone. She carried an official-looking folder under one arm, while 2 HOA board members followed behind her like nervous assistants. "Good morning, Earl," she said cheerfully, acting as though she hadn't called me, a welfare freeloader, less than 12 hours earlier. "I trust you've had some time to consider your situation." That was the moment I understood exactly what I was dealing with. Felicia wasn't merely a difficult neighbor with control issues. She had built an entire system designed to push out anyone she considered beneath her standards. What she didn't know was that her husband's law firm regularly represented the same kinds of drug dealers and criminals I'd spent years putting in prison. And what she definitely didn't know was that the so-called welfare freeloader standing in front of her happened to be the elected sheriff of Millfield County. The anger simmering inside me became colder and more focused. Felicia Worthington had declared war on the wrong person, and before long she was going to learn exactly who she was dealing with. I called the permit office to verify the code, requirements for temporary wind protection structures. The clerk was knowledgeable and straightforward. If the structure is truly temporary, installed and removed within 72 hours, and doesn't involve any permanent anchoring to the ground, no permit is required. It sounded exactly like what I had described. And according to the clerk, it fell under emergency weather protection, which is specifically permitted. So Natasha's attorney had been wrong about the building codes. Strike one! But that's when things started getting interesting. While I still had the permit office on the line, I asked about recent permits issued in our neighborhood. "Can you tell me what permits have been pulled for Sunset Meadows over the past year?" "Let me take a look," the clerk replied. "I see landscaping permits for the entrance areas, and that's all." "Nothing else?" "Nothing else on record." "What about electrical work?" "We recently had new lighting installed along the walkways." "No electrical permits on file for your development." Strike two. That weekend, I decided to inspect our beautiful new decorative lighting more closely. The fixtures were clearly professional grade. Expensive bronze lanterns connected with underground wiring. It was exactly the kind of installation that absolutely required electrical permits and inspections. As I was examining one of the fixtures, my neighbor Jerry, a retired firefighter, walked over. "Nice lights," he said. "Must have cost a fortune." "They do look good," I replied. "Ever notice anything unusual about the installation?" Jerry crouched down and studied the spot where the wiring disappeared underground. His expression immediately changed. Eugene, this junction box isn't rated for underground outdoor use. See those rust stains already forming? That's a fire hazard waiting to happen. Jerry had spent 30 years with the Austin Fire Department. When he called something a fire hazard, people listened. It gets worse, he continued, pointing toward another fixture. Look at the spacing. These lights are way too close to those oak trees. Once the branches grow out, they're going to create contact hazards. One decent storm and you could end up with energized wires touching. Tree branches. I started taking more photographs while Jerry helped document everything we found. Improper junction boxes, insufficient clearance from vegetation, and wiring that looked like it had been installed by someone who cared more about appearance than safety. Jerry, in your professional opinion, would this installation pass an electrical inspection? Not a chance, he said. Whoever did this cut corners just to make it look good. Sunday evening, I made copies of all the documents and drove over to Jerry's house. He reviewed the financial records while I explained everything I had uncovered. Eugene, this is serious, he said. Self-dealing, unlicensed contractors, safety violations. If someone gets hurt and this comes out during a lawsuit, the HOA's insurance company might refuse coverage altogether. What do you think I should do? Well, you could report it to the Texas Attorney General's office, or you could make one final attempt to work with the board. I decided to try diplomacy one last time. Monday morning, I sent a detailed email to all 5 board members, outlining the financial irregularities, the contractor licensing problems, and the safety violations I had documented. I also offered to discuss possible solutions privately before taking any formal action. The response arrived Tuesday morning directly from Natasha, and it told me everything I needed to know about the kind of person I was dealing with. Mr. Walsh, your baseless accusations and ongoing harassment of this board constitute defamation. We are forwarding your communications to our attorney for appropriate legal action. Furthermore, due to your disruptive conduct, you are hereby prohibited from using any HOA common areas until your outstanding violations are resolved. Banned from amenities I helped pay for. But one word caught my attention. Defamation. Defamation requires false statements. Everything I had documented was factual and verifiable. That meant Natasha was either deliberately misrepresenting the facts, or she didn't actually understand what defamation meant. Either way, I was done playing nice. That Tuesday evening, I made a decision that would change everything. I was finished trying to operate within Natasha's system. It was time to go around it entirely. My first call was to the Texas State Board of Architectural Examiners. When contractors perform work outside the scope of their license, it stops being just a local code issue. It becomes a state regulatory issue. And when that work creates public safety hazards, multiple agencies start paying attention very quickly. I need to report unlicensed electrical work performed by a landscaping contractor, I told the intake specialist. What type of safety hazard are we talking about? Improper underground junction boxes, inadequate clearance from vegetation, and potential fire hazards in a residential neighborhood. How many residents could be affected? 67 families. There was a brief pause. Sir, you'll need to submit a formal complaint with supporting documentation. This may trigger a multi-agency investigation. Multi-agency. Those were beautiful words. That weekend, I spent hours organizing my evidence into a comprehensive case file. Photos of every safety violation. Financial records documenting the self-dealing. Contractor license records showing expired credentials. HOA bylaws proving the approval process had been bypassed. But as I worked through everything, something jumped out at me that made my quality control instincts light up. This wasn't just one corrupt board president. This was a systematic pattern of regulatory violations spanning multiple agencies. Here's what I discovered. The unpermitted electrical work violated building codes. That involved code enforcement. The unlicensed contractor work violated state licensing laws. That involved the licensing board. The pool safety deficiencies violated health regulations. That involved the health department. The playground inspection failures involved child safety requirements and park oversight agencies. The stormwater management issues created by landscaping modifications potentially violated environmental regulations. And then there was the financial self-dealing, which fell under HOA governance laws and the jurisdiction of the Attorney General. On top of that, electrical fire hazards brought the state fire marshal's office into the picture. I had accidentally uncovered what regulatory professionals call a cascade failure, one violation, triggering problems across multiple regulatory systems. Wednesday morning, I started making calls, not to threaten anyone, not to complain, simply to report documented safety concerns and request inspections. First call, Austin Fire Marshal's office. I need to report electrical fire hazards in a residential community. Second call, environmental regulators. I need to report unapproved stormwater. Modifications affecting neighborhood drainage. Third call, Travis County Health Department. I need to report missing safety equipment at a community pool used by 67 families. Fourth call, Texas Attorney General's HOA Division. I need to report possible financial self-dealing by an HOA board. Every agency told me essentially the same thing. Submit a formal complaint with documentation, and they would investigate. By Friday afternoon, I had filed detailed complaints with 7 separate agencies. Each complaint referenced the others, creating a paper trail that would be nearly impossible for any one agency to overlook. What I didn't expect was how quickly things started moving. Monday morning, Travis County Health Department called. Mr. Walsh, we've reviewed your complaint regarding the Sunset Meadows community pool. We're scheduling an emergency inspection for Thursday. Will you be available to meet with the inspector on site? Tuesday brought a call from the fire marshal's office. Mr. Walsh, we're coordinating with code enforcement on a joint inspection of the electrical hazards you reported. Can you walk our teams through the locations you documented? Wednesday came another call. Environmental investigators. Mr. Walsh, we are opening a formal investigation into unauthorized stormwater modifications within your community. We'll need to interview the contractors involved. By Thursday morning, 6 separate investigations were either scheduled or already underway. Each agency was operating independently, but all of them were focused on the same neighborhood and the same pattern of cutting corners that Natasha had created in her obsession with appearances over safety. That afternoon, my phone rang. It was Natasha. For the first time since this started, she didn't sound angry. She sounded frightened. Eugene, what exactly have you done? I reported documented safety violations to the appropriate regulatory agencies, I said calmly. The same violations I tried to discuss with the board before you threatened to place a lien on my house. You don't understand what you've started, she said. These inspections could shut down community facilities. Property values could collapse. Then maybe you should have listened when I offered to discuss solutions privately, she hung up. That evening, I realized something important. Natasha was scared because she knew exactly how serious the situation was, which meant she might try to cover her tracks, shift blame, or launch some form of damage control. I needed to be prepared. That weekend, I built what I call a documentation fortress. In quality control, evidence alone isn't enough. Evidence must be organized, accessible, and legally defensible. I created digital backups of everything in 3 separate locations: my laptop, an external hard drive, and secure cloud storage. Every photo, every financial document, every email, every complaint form. Printed out, the file exceeded 200 pages. Then I created an escalation timeline, a chronological record showing exactly how everything unfolded. It started with my temporary wind barrier installation and followed every HOA violation notice, every attempt at a peaceful resolution, and every discovery I made along the way. The timeline clearly showed one thing: I had tried to work within the system. Natasha had rejected every reasonable solution. Only then did I involve outside agencies, and that distinction mattered. My manufacturing background helped in another way. I knew that regulatory investigators dealing with complex violations need information presented clearly and efficiently, so I prepared inspection briefings for each agency. For the fire marshal, I created maps showing every electrical hazard location, complete with photos and code references. I researched the exact sections of the National Electrical Code that had been violated and summarized them in plain language. For the health department, I documented the missing pool safety equipment and cited the Texas health regulations specifying exactly what was required. I even included manufacturer specifications and pricing information to demonstrate that the issue wasn't cost, it was priorities. For environmental investigators, I traced the stormwater modifications using county drainage maps, illustrating how landscaping changes had altered water flow patterns. I had learned that approach while dealing with manufacturing runoff issues. Follow the water. Document the changes. Demonstrate the impact. Tuesday brought my first inspection walkthrough. At 2 p.m., Travis County Health Inspector, Sarah Finley, a no-nonsense professional carrying a tablet and digital camera, met me at the community pool. "Show me exactly what concerns you," she said. I walked Inspector Finley through each missing safety requirement one by one. No reaching poles, which are required every 50 feet around the pool perimeter. No ring buoys, which are required every 75 feet. No posted emergency procedures at any of the pool entrances. "Mr. Walsh," she asked, "in your professional opinion, how long have these safety items been missing? Based on what I've observed over the last 3 years, I don't believe they were ever installed." She photographed everything, took measurements, and entered detailed notes into her tablet. "How many families use this pool?" 67 homes. During the summer, probably around 200 people. Kids use it constantly after school, and weekends are always packed. She shook her head. "This is a major liability issue. The HOA's insurance carrier should have required compliance before coverage was ever issued." Wednesday brought the fire marshal's inspection, and that's when things became even more interesting. Fire Marshal Rodriguez arrived, alongside an electrical inspector and a code enforcement officer. 3 professionals, all focused on Natasha's expensive lighting project. The electrical inspector spent nearly 20 minutes examining the very first fixture. "This junction box isn't approved for underground burial," he told Rodriguez. "It's already showing signs of moisture intrusion and corrosion." "What's the fire risk?" Rodriguez asked. "High, especially with the tree clearance issues. One strong storm could put energized wiring into contact with wet vegetation." The team documented everything methodically. They measured clearances, photographed violations, tested electrical connections. By the end of the inspection, they had identified 12 separate code violations within the lighting system alone. As we wrapped up, Fire Marshal Rodriguez turned to me. "Mr. Walsh, who performed the electrical installation?" "That's part of the problem," I said. "The work was done by a landscaping company whose electrical credentials had expired." His expression immediately hardened. "Unlicensed electrical work creating fire hazards? If someone gets injured, that could rise to criminal negligence." By Thursday, I had a growing stack of preliminary inspection reports. Each one documented serious safety violations that Natasha's board had either ignored or directly created. But I also knew Natasha wasn't going down without a fight. Friday morning brought the counterattack I had been expecting. Unfortunately, it was worse than I imagined. While checking my email before work, I found a message that made my stomach drop. It had been sent to the entire neighborhood. Mailing list from Natasha's official HOA president account. The subject line read, "Protecting our community from harassment." The email was a master class in manipulation. Natasha portrayed herself as the victim of a bitter homeowner who had weaponized government agencies against his own neighbors. She claimed I was retaliating against legitimate HOA enforcement and suggested that my frivolous complaints could cost the neighborhood thousands of dollars in unnecessary repairs, forcing homeowners to pay special assessments. But the dirtiest part was how she described the safety violations. She dismissed them as minor administrative oversights and implied that I was exaggerating insignificant issues to avoid paying a legitimate HOA fine. The email ended with a call for community unity against harassment and announced an emergency board meeting to address what she called a disruptive situation. Within an hour, my phone started ringing. The first call came from Mrs. Patterson, the elderly resident who had previously expressed concerns about the playground.
"Eugene, I'm so sorry," she said. "I never thought things would become this complicated." "What do you mean?" "Well, after Natasha's email, I'm worried that if I support your concerns, my costs could go up because of those special assessments she mentioned." The next call came from Tom Valdez, whose daughter had slipped near the pool. "Eugene, I appreciate what you're trying to do," he said carefully. "But my wife is worried this could affect our home value. We're trying to refinance." That's when I understood Natasha's strategy. She was using financial fear as a weapon. She was forcing people to choose between safety and money. But Saturday brought a development that showed just how far she was willing to go. I was working in my garage when my neighbor across the street, Linda Morrison, walked over looking uncomfortable. "Eugene, I need to tell you something." "What is it?" "Natasha stopped by yesterday evening." "What did she want?" She asked a lot of questions about you, about your boys, your work schedule, whether you seemed unstable after your wife passed away. My hands tightened into fists. What kind of questions? She wanted to know if I'd ever seen you drinking during the day, if your boys seemed neglected, if you'd ever acted aggressively or threatened anyone. Linda paused. She said she was gathering information about a concerning resident situation. That was when I realized Natasha wasn't simply fighting my safety complaints. She was building a character assassination campaign. Monday morning confirmed it. I received a call from my son's school counselor. Mr. Walsh, I wanted to give you a heads up. Someone contacted our office asking questions about Marcus and David's attendance and behavior. Who? They said they were representing the Homeowners Association. They claimed they were conducting a neighborhood safety assessment and were concerned about the boys' home environment after recent family stress. I saw red. Going after me was one thing. Going after my kids crossed every line. But later that afternoon, I received news that helped explain exactly how desperate Natasha had become. Jerry stopped by with information that made everything suddenly make sense. My wife ran into David Richmond at the grocery store this morning, Jerry said. What did he say? He looked stressed. She asked if everything was okay, and he mentioned state investigators asking questions about his contracting work. What else? He said Natasha was handling it, but he was worried about losing the business. Suddenly, all the pieces fit together. Natasha's increasingly desperate attacks weren't just about winning an HOA dispute. Her husband's company was under state investigation. That investigation could lead to criminal charges, financial losses, or even the collapse of their business. She wasn't fighting for authority anymore. She was fighting for her family's financial survival.
That evening, Fire Marshal Rodriguez called with an update that confirmed my suspicions. Mr. Walsh, I wanted to let you know that our investigation has uncovered a larger pattern of unlicensed work across multiple communities. How large are we talking? We're coordinating with the Attorney General's office. Your complaint triggered a broader investigation into Richmond Landscaping Services. Could this result in charges? Yes, he said. Potentially criminal charges related to unlicensed contracting and public safety violations. Wednesday brought Natasha's most desperate move yet. I found another certified letter in my mailbox. This one wasn't from the HOA attorney. It came from something called Community Protection Services, a supposed neighborhood safety assessment company. The letter claimed I was under investigation for concerning behavior patterns and potential threats based on multiple resident complaints. I researched the company immediately. It didn't exist. The listed address was a post office box. The phone number connected to a generic voicemail repeating only the company name. Natasha had literally invented a fake organization to intimidate me. That evening, I contacted an attorney for the first time. Sometimes you need professional help when dealing with people who have completely abandoned their moral compass. My attorney, Rebecca Santos, listened to my story for 45 minutes without interrupting. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair and shook her head. Eugene, based on what you've described, this woman may have committed multiple violations, such as creating a fake safety organization, filing false reports involving your children, harassment through intimidation. And that's before we even discuss the HOA governance issues. What do you recommend? Document everything. Respond to nothing directly. Let me handle all future communications. She paused. She's desperate, and desperate people can be dangerous. Rebecca turned out to be absolutely right. Thursday morning brought Natasha's most unhinged stunt yet. I was getting ready for work when I heard voices outside. Looking through the window, I saw Natasha standing in my front yard with two women I didn't recognize and a man carrying what looked like a tablet. I stepped outside. There he is, Natasha announced loudly. The resident I was telling you about. One of the women approached holding a clipboard. Sir, we're conducting a neighborhood wellness assessment. Are you Eugene Walsh? Who's asking? I'm with Community Safety Services. We're investigating reports of concerning behavior and property maintenance issues. Another fake organization. Only this time, Natasha had recruited actual people to participate. I'm going to need to see some credentials, I said as I pulled out my phone and started recording. Sir, there's no need to be hostile, the woman replied. We're simply trying to ensure neighborhood safety. Ma'am, I have no idea who you are or who sent you. You're on my property without permission. Please leave. That's when the man holding the tablet spoke up. We're documenting potential code violations and safety concerns associated with this property. Suddenly, I understood exactly what was happening. Natasha was creating her own fake inspection process to counter the real investigations that were unraveling her position. She had probably convinced these people that I was the problem homeowner. "You need to leave now," I said clearly, making sure my recording captured every word. "Or I'm calling the police." They left, but not before taking photographs of my house, my vehicle, and even my mailbox. That afternoon, I forwarded the recording to Rebecca and to the detective overseeing the Attorney General's investigation into Natasha's HOA activities. Less than 2 hours later, I received a call that completely made my day. "Mr. Walsh, this is Detective Morrison with the Attorney General's office. We need to discuss expanding this investigation. What happened at your home today may constitute criminal harassment and potentially fraud." Friday brought the news I had been waiting for. The final agency inspection reports were complete, and they were devastating for Natasha. The fire marshal's report identified 12 electrical code violations that created immediate fire hazards. The health department documented systematic safety failures, requiring the immediate closure of the community pool. Environmental regulators cited unapproved stormwater modifications that required restoration, work, and possible penalties. Code enforcement identified multiple instances of unlicensed construction, requiring professional correction. But the biggest bombshell came from the Attorney General's financial investigation. Investigators discovered that Richmond Landscaping Services had received more than $300,000 from 6 separate HOA communities managed by the same group of board members. This wasn't just self-dealing anymore. It was organized fraud. Saturday evening, I received a phone call I had been both expecting and dreading. "Eugene, it's Natasha. We need to talk. All communication goes through my attorney." "Please," she said. "I'm trying to fix this before it gets any worse." "It's already worse, Natasha. You committed multiple violations, trying to cover up your husband's unlicensed work. I never intended for any of this to happen. Can't we work something out?" "What kind of arrangement?" "I'll remove the fine. We'll correct the safety issues. David will get properly licensed. Just please don't push for criminal charges." For a brief moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. "Natasha, I tried to work something out 6 months ago. You threatened my home, targeted my children, and created fake organizations to intimidate me. This stopped being about a wind barrier a long time ago. Then what do you want?" "I want you to face the consequences of your decisions. And I want this community to have leadership that values safety over profit." She hung up. But the damage was already done. On a recorded phone line, she had practically admitted everything. Sunday brought one final attempt at manipulation. Natasha sent an email to the entire neighborhood announcing an emergency community meeting for Monday evening. According to her message, the purpose was to address false accusations and protect the community from frivolous government interference. She was preparing for one last effort to turn the neighborhood against me. Perfect, because I was ready for a public meeting too. And this time, I wouldn't be standing alone. Monday evening at 6:30, the community center was packed. Residents who had never attended an HOA meeting before showed up looking for answers. News of the investigations had spread throughout the neighborhood. Natasha stood at the front of the room alongside her remaining allies on the board, looking as though she was preparing for battle. She had a PowerPoint presentation, professional-looking handouts, everything carefully prepared. What she didn't know was that I had invited a few guests of my own. At 6:45, Detective Morrison walked through the doors. Right behind him came Fire Marshal Rodriguez and Health Inspector Finley. All three quietly took seats in the back row, notebooks in hand. The meeting began with Natasha's presentation, protecting our community from government overreach. She spoke about property values, community standards, the dangers of allowing disruptive residents to weaponize government agencies. Slide after slide displayed photos of our neighborhood's attractive amenities. She repeatedly described the violations as minor administrative oversights that were being exaggerated by someone with a personal grudge. "The truth," she said while looking directly at me, "is that this entire situation stems from one resident who refused to pay a legitimate fine and chose to retaliate by filing frivolous complaints with multiple agencies." A few residents nodded. Some even murmured in agreement. She was good at public speaking. "But we cannot allow outside interference to destroy what we've built here," she continued. "I have consulted with legal counsel. and we have grounds to pursue claims for harassment and defamation. That was when I stood up. Point of order, Natasha. May I address the community regarding these so-called frivolous complaints? You'll have your opportunity during public comments. Actually, Detective Morrison said from the back of the room, we'd like to hear from Mr. Walsh now. The room instantly fell silent. I walked to the front carrying a thick folder of documents. Neighbors, I'd like to show you what professional investigators consider frivolous complaints. I held up the fire marshal's report. 12 electrical code violations, creating fire hazards that could seriously injure or kill people. These are not administrative oversights. These are life safety failures. Next, I held up the health department report. Missing safety equipment required by law at every public pool. Equipment designed to save lives. Then I raised the financial investigation summary. More than $300,000 in contracts, awarded to an unlicensed contractor owned by our HOA, president's husband. Contracts that bypassed homeowner approval requirements while creating the safety hazards we're discussing tonight. The room was completely silent. But here's what matters most, I continued. 6 months ago, I attempted to address these issues privately with the board. I was labeled disruptive. When I documented safety concerns, I was threatened with liens. When I asked for transparency, I was accused of harassment. I turned toward Natasha. And when none of that worked, you began investigating my children and creating fake companies to intimidate me. That's a lie, Natasha shouted as she jumped to her feet. Is it? I pulled out my phone and played the recording from Thursday morning. The voices filled the room. Sir, we're conducting a neighborhood wellness assessment. The reaction was immediate. People started talking over one another. Several residents stood up. Confusion quickly turned into anger. Order! Shouted Board Member Williams, who had remained silent until that moment. That was when Fire Marshal Rodriguez stood. Ladies and gentlemen, there are several statements that need clarification. The room became quiet again. I've served with the Austin Fire Department for 18 years, he said. I have rarely seen this level of systematic safety violations within a single community. He looked directly at Natasha. The electrical hazards alone could have resulted in multiple structure fires. These are not frivolous complaints. These are serious violations that endangered residents, and the unlicensed electrical work may constitute criminal negligence. Health Inspector Finley stood next. The pool safety deficiencies we documented would result in immediate closure at most public facilities. She paused. The fact that children were using this pool without required safety equipment is unacceptable. Then Detective Morrison delivered the final blow. Ms. Richmond, based on the evidence gathered so far, we are recommending criminal charges involving fraud, unlicensed contracting, and criminal harassment. Your husband's company appears to have been operating illegally across multiple communities. Natasha's face lost all color. You can't prove any of this. Actually, I replied, we can. I lifted the financial records. Every contract. Every bypassed approval process. Every payment made to Richmond. Landscaping services. While its license was expired. I paused. And recorded phone calls in which you attempted to negotiate your way out of potential criminal charges. The room erupted again. Only this time the anger was directed entirely at Natasha. You put our children at risk for money, Mrs. Patterson shouted. How much is this going to cost us to fix? Tom Valdez demanded. Natasha made one final desperate attempt. You're all letting him destroy this community over a wind barrier. That was when I delivered the statement I had been waiting to make. Natasha, this stopped being about my wind barrier the moment you chose profit over safety. You created these problems. You ignored these dangers. And when I tried to protect this neighborhood, you attacked my family. I turned toward my neighbors. The real question isn't whether we can afford to fix these problems. It's whether we can afford not to. The emergency board vote happened right there in the community center. Detective Morrison documented everything for the ongoing investigation. The result was decisive. Natasha was removed as HOA president by a 4-to-1 vote. Her own vote was the only one in her favor. Mrs. Patterson was elected interim president. Her first action was eliminating my wind barrier fine. Her second was authorizing immediate repairs for every documented safety issue. The numbers were sobering. $43,000 to bring the electrical system into compliance. $12,000 for proper pool safety equipment. $8,000 for playground inspections and repairs, $15,000 for environmental restoration. But here's the thing about doing the right thing. Sometimes it pays off. When the HOA's insurance company learned about the safety violations, it agreed to cover 80% of the repair costs under its liability protection provisions. As it turns out, insurance companies are not fans of unlicensed electrical work that could burn down entire neighborhoods. Natasha and David, Richmond eventually faced charges related to fraud and unlicensed contracting. David negotiated a plea agreement that included community service, license penalties, and restitution payments to 6 separate HOA communities. Natasha resigned from all leadership positions. 3 months later, she moved away. The criminal investigation eventually revealed that the scheme had defrauded homeowner associations across Central Texas out of more than $500,000. What started as a simple dispute over my temporary wind barrier had accidentally uncovered one of the largest HOA fraud scandals the region had ever seen. But the biggest victory wasn't the investigation. It was watching our community come together once the truth finally came out. Tom Valdez, the same guy who had originally been worried about property values, became chairman of our new safety committee. Mrs. Patterson implemented quarterly financial transparency meetings where every homeowner could review proposed expenses before they were approved. Jerry, my retired firefighter neighbor, launched a community emergency preparedness program. Today we have proper storm response procedures, coordinated emergency supply plans, and clear guidelines for temporary weather protection that prioritize safety without sacrificing common sense. Marcus and David learned something valuable through the entire experience. They learned that standing up for what's right isn't always easy, but it's always worth it. Marcus even wrote his college application essay about watching his dad fight for community safety. Both boys were accepted into their first-choice schools. As for me, I discovered an unexpected new career path. It turns out I had a talent for regulatory compliance consulting. These days, I help communities evaluate safety procedures, review governance practices, and identify risks before they become disasters. It's rewarding work. I get to use my quality control background to prevent the exact kinds of problems that occur when people put appearance ahead of safety. In Sarah's memory, we also created the Sarah Walsh Community Safety Fund. The organization provides grants for safety equipment, emergency preparedness programs, and community inspections in underserved neighborhoods. Because if this experience taught me anything, it's that safety isn't a luxury. It's a responsibility we owe to one another. So far, the fund has helped 12 different communities install critical safety equipment, complete required inspections, and train residents for emergency situations. Just last month, one of our inspection programs identified failing playground equipment at a low-income housing complex, preventing what could have been a serious accident. 6 months after that community center meeting, we held a neighborhood block party to celebrate the completion of all safety upgrades. The new electrical system was both attractive and fully compliant. The pool had every required safety feature, along with additional accessibility improvements. The playground had been completely rebuilt to exceed current safety standards. And when the next major storm arrived, a powerful system with winds reaching 70 miles per hour, our community was ready. Neighbors helped each other prepare. People checked on elderly residents. Emergency response plans were activated smoothly. No one complained about temporary protective measures because everyone finally understood the same thing. Safety comes first. Natasha's decorative lighting system was replaced with modern LED fixtures that were not only attractive but fully code compliant. Ironically, the new installation increased property values more than the original project ever did, because prospective buyers could see that the community cared about both appearance and safety. Now I'd like to hear from you. Have you ever dealt with an HOA that prioritized appearances over resident safety? Have you experienced a board that ignored legitimate concerns or retaliated against homeowners who spoke up? Share your HOA stories in the comments below. The more people talk about these issues, the more likely we are to prevent them from happening to other families. And if you enjoyed this story, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications. I've got plenty more stories about standing up to petty authority, abuse of power, and people who thought they could get away with cutting corners. Next time, I'll tell you about the contractor who tried to use substandard materials during a school renovation project, and the unexpected consequences that followed. Until then, remember this. Your family's safety is worth more than someone else's pride. Speak up, stand your ground, and never let anyone convince you that protecting the people you love is somehow being disruptive. Thanks for watching.